Hello and welcome to Blockchain Gaming World, episode 198. I'm your host, John Jordan. Don't forget to check out my daily email about blockchain gaming. You can find that at qhatgamestx.substack.com. In today's episode, I'm talking to Paul Bettner, who is the CEO at Playful Studios, and Brad Weir, who is the chief game designer for Wildcard. So we are talking Wildcard. Finally got them on the podcast. Been looking forward to that podcast. And really enjoyed it, and I think it sort of covered a lot of significant stuff that people in the blockchain game space can learn from. I mean, the key thing about it is Wildcard as a game. So it's a game that Playful Studios have been working on for over 7 years and really have, a great passion to create something that they think can be a truly great game. Sort of a bit of a mashup of sort of MOBAs and card collection as well. So a bit of a hybrid. And really the focus of everything they're building is Wildcard has to be a brilliant game that people just love to play. The other thing, though, is that they want it to be a great game that people want to watch. So really one of the key design sort of features behind Wildcard is that it's designed for streaming. Sort of a streaming first game, I suppose. And the reason that's important is because Wildcard itself is a totally web2 game, so there's no web3 in there at all, which means it can be distributed obviously through Steam and other platforms like that. But the sort of community side, the crypto side, is within the streaming platform called Thousands. As we discussed, they didn't originally plan to do that whole platform themselves. Originally, they thought they might be able to do it through Twitch or Discord, but they ended up having this sort of double ambitious goal of building a great game and a Web3 streaming platform. But really, the key thing there is that they want a platform where they can do rev share with streamers and content creators who are building around this fantastic game. So I think a really interesting, obviously, sort of business model. And really, I think what comes out from the podcast is the sort of passion with which they are approaching this project and the ambition they have for it. And I think also, from their previous experience, they have obviously great experience of making some great games over the years. And also they are, as we would think of, using sort of Web3 in the place in which Web3 can be very, very powerful and not trying to sort of bolt it on to areas in which it could be a problem. So I think that's why Thousands and Wildcard really stand out as a project you should be looking at and what they're doing. So I hope you enjoy the podcast. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out in future. But on with the show. Hello, everybody. Very pleased today. I have Paul Bettner, CEO from Playful Studios, Wild Paul, as he's showing up in the in the podcast feed, and Brad, who is the lead game designer on Wildcard. So thanks, both of you, for coming on the show.
Our pleasure. Thanks for having us, man. Appreciate being here. And by the way, Wild Paul is my new nickname because I guess we all had handles or whatever growing up, like usernames, and I never really had one I liked. Like I used to use Winter for some reason. There's like a history there. Anyway, we're working on Wildcard now, and I just started using Wild Paul, and I think I'm just gonna go with that now for the rest of my life.
It feels appropriate, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
It's found you. Your handle's found you.
Finally, eventually. I have a username that I like when I'm at 47.
I feel like you should change it to Polgar.
Bolgar, yes. You have a character in the game Wildcard called Bolgar that just coincidentally looks like me. So yeah, Polgar would be pretty good.
He's a big beefy chap, isn't he?
Yeah, exactly.
Is he the one with the bear?
Yes. The guy with the beard. Yeah.
Won't ask you have a bear. Okay, let's get down to business rather than just having fun. So we're gonna have a bit of structure. So I thought, to begin with, I will start with you, Paul. And normally I ask people to sort of go through their history, but I think people should sort of know your history, so I'll sort of state your history and then we'll lead on into questions. So you've been around in the not only have you been around in the games industry for a long time, it's sort of interesting, I guess, that you've in your career through luck or skill or whatever, you sort of hit the significant sort of trends as they've come along. So you spent a long time working on PC games like Age of Empires. That's the big famous one you did. Then you and your brother set up a studio and you did the first big sort of hit sort of mobile game with Words with Friends, very massively successful, sold to Zynga. Then you did VR. So you sort of going through these things, and then you've sort of ended up with as we'll sort of unpick, not a Web2 game, not a Web3 game, but a Web2 game with a Web3 ecosystem. So.
Yeah.
And when I sort of see that career, I can see, there's a few people who've done that sort of, sort of cycle through sort of PC, console, mobile, what's next. Not so many of them went into Web3, and from your background, if I might say, you're not someone who sort of struck me as heavily into sort of crypto, and yeah, we're going to dive into this. Maybe I'm wrong. So I just kind of wondered, maybe your potted history bit could be having gone through making these sort of proper games for these new platforms. Why did Web3 strike you as something? Oh, I need to make a game using this technology, or how did that process sort of come about?
It didn't.
Yeah, okay, good. That's a good answer.
Right. You're right to call it out. I was not. I was at best a crypto-skeptic back in 2018. Good. I mean, I knew what it was. I knew what blockchain was, sort of. I knew what coins were. I kind of was where a lot of Web2 users still are who haven't necessarily been spending any time in Web3, which is skeptical at best, because really there's not. Like, it's just a technology. It's like trying to get excited about a database or something. Like, it doesn't, it really needs to do something that makes games better before gamers are going to take it seriously or care about it. And I think mobile did that, because mobile gave us games we could play on the go in our pocket. So cool, it's like a Game Boy on my phone. Like, that makes sense, and I'm excited about that. I think Web3 still has to prove itself that way. But when I first got into it, we were actually working on Wildcard and we still are, the focus being, to your point, we're always trying to do something on some new platform, but the new platform wasn't Web3, it was streaming, and it still is. What we are most excited about, as far as what we're trying to push the boundaries of with Wildcard, is games that are as fun to watch as they are to play, and are built for content creators and fans and spectators and viewers to enjoy, not just as a competitive game down on the field, but also as something they would tune into and watch, and have in a browser window while they're working or whatever it is. That is what I fell in love with. It's like 7 years ago now when we started working on this project. And in our pursuit to find a technology that let us build that vision, it turns out blockchain and Web3 is a perfect fit for that. But that's really just because the underlying technology is exactly what we needed to create this like connected ecosystem of competitors, content creators, communities, and the commerce that we kind of want to go outside of just the game. We want this to be like an ecosystem that even if you don't install the game, even if all you do is tune in to watch, or you're a content creator and or community that's getting involved in the Wildcard experience, that you can get involved and you can fully lean in, and you don't even necessarily need to install the game to be a part of that community. So we were looking for technologies that would do that. We started working with Amazon, we started working with Discord, we started trying to push those boundaries, and we weren't really getting what we needed out of that, so we started to build it ourselves, and that's when we discovered Web3 and kind of found this fit. But to your point, we have this weird disease as a studio that I don't think all other studios have, where we're just always drawn to not just building an evergreen game that is a truly great game, but also finding some way in which that game can push games forward, can push the industry forward, and can find like some new emerging part of the industry. So that's why we have this weird career that goes from through VR and mobile and free to play and all those other things. Yeah.
Cool. And Brad, I guess as from the game design point of view, as I've sort of said, Wildcard itself is a Web2 game. I don't think it's ever been designed as a Web3 game. I don't think it's ever been designed with any NFTs or tokens or anything like that. So from the game design point of view, it's just, being a sort of standard, not standard, because obviously you don't think your game is standard, but from that design perspective, has that been like a very similar to all the sort of games you've worked on? Just obviously, so you can go through the genre and how you've gone around that, but the Web3 stuff is, in a sense, is not impinged upon that at all.
Yeah. The Web3, we kind of keep it separate. They both have their own lanes and everything, and their own ecosystems and whatnot. But the biggest difference with this game is it's not, when you work on a lot of other games, there's a genre for that game. Like honestly, like it's like you're creating a MOBA or you're creating a TCG, and what you're making and what you're designing for is very known. Right. And obviously those games were unknown when they first came about. Like, I'm sure the first TCG was way different in the development process for whoever did that. Right. And the first battle royale, look at Fortnite when it first started. So there's always that first step to a new genre. And ours is kind of that. Right. Like, we're mixing elements from multiple genres, putting it into one thing. So we've had these ebbs and flows and twists and turns to figure out how they all play together, and how does it culminate to this genre that we're calling a CCAG. So that's
collectible card action game.
Yeah, that's where the hard stuff comes in. So that's really where it's different, right? It's when it's a first of a kind, there's different stuff you have to figure out.
Yeah, and it ties to what I was saying. Web3 is an enabling technology for the new things we're trying to do. Our studio, for whatever reason, attracts these folks like myself, like Brad, who love working on these frontiers. They're not satisfied with just doing another shooter or another extraction, game, another MOBA, whatever. They're really interested in pushing those boundaries. When you look at Brad's background with Smite was kind of a brand new genre game at the time that it came out too. And actually there's some commonality a little bit between Wildcard and Smite in terms of, it's a creature summoning game, it's an action game, puts you down on the field in control of a champion. But for Wildcard, there just wasn't a game like it. And we, at that point, had built a studio of where that's all we're trying to do. We're trying to we're not satisfied just going and doing a sequel to something. We want to try to push those boundaries. Like when we were doing Lucky's Tale in VR, it was like, can you even do a platformer in virtual reality? Does that even work? And we were working with Oculus and they didn't even believe it at the time. And we are like, no, trust us. We think you can make it work. And that was a really fun process. And we have sort of become that studio. I think it's not, we like to say when we're hiring someone, we're like, we're not for everyone. If you want something that's easy or, just get a paycheck or work on a game that what you're doing already, that's not us. We are going to constantly challenge ourselves to find new frontiers in game design and in how we mix these amazing new technologies into what we're doing. And we have attracted and retained a certain set of people who now I've been working with. I mean, a lot of the core team on Wildcard goes all the way back to Age of Empires. So these are people that kind of fell in love with that, fell in love with pushing those boundaries, and I've been working with now for almost 30 years.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know if this is true or not, but it seems like, you did raise a large sum of money. I think it was 47 million.
Yes.
Something like that. But you seem to be a very small team. I think reading somebody, you're maybe 40 or something, which is interesting.
We're about 30 full-time people.
Yeah.
I don't like necessarily using that number because it doesn't give credit to. There's probably about 200 developers now who have worked on this game. The way that the game industry works these days is, there's small studios like us that are able to expand our effort and our reach by working with amazing vendors, contractors, other remote studios that help augment our efforts. And so we're doing that too. And so even though it's a small, fairly small team of 30 full-time people, we work with almost, up to a couple hundred people total.
I guess it's been funny in the broad scheme of Web3, where people will raise a ton of money and then suddenly you realise they talk about, we've got 300 full-time people, and they do that for about 6 months, and obviously then they're down to 25.
I've been through that cycle too. I'm too old to go just raise a bunch of money and blow it all at once and be like, oh shit, we ran out of money. Yeah. So to your point, we raised 47 million, 46 and a half, something like that, from Paradigm, which we were very proud. It's the first time I'd actually ever met or worked with Paradigm. I've worked with a lot of VCs. We sold Words with Friends to Zynga, so kind of went through the whole VC cycle in the last generation. But it was the first time I'd ever met and worked with the folks at Paradigm. They're amazing. They have been just an incredible supporter. They have been laser focused on Wildcard the game. They have never pushed us to implement or adapt any Web3 technologies or tokens or NFTs or anything like that to the game unless we had a really good case for why that was going to make the game better. And I think that's really rare in this space. And people talk about them being an S-tier, kind of Web3 investor, and that has definitely been my experience.
No, that was it was interesting when that financing came out. That was when everyone was raising tons of money, so it didn't sort of stand out that much. But it was interesting because Paradigm were known as a very high-end crypto-only investor. So I think that maybe from the outside, that's sort of been an interesting skew where we sort of, someone like me was like, oh, these guys are making a full-on on-chain game, but clearly
nope. It turns out the thing that people don't know about Paradigm is they internally are hardcore gamers, super hardcore gamers. And the reason that they splashed that big check on the Wildcard was literally just because they played the game. That was it. They played the game and they were like, this is easily the most fun, highest potential game we have ever played in Web3. And they made their decision based on that. And that tells you a little bit early about who they are and why we're working with them.
So they also invest pretty heavily in parallel, so it's maybe an interesting sort of thing going on there.
Yes.
Okay, let's get into the game a bit more on the game design. So I've not played it. I have sort of watched quite a bit of it and followed from afar. And it seems like from when you were first sort of showing stuff that there has been. I don't know how significant those changes would be from
Really
like a game design
significant.
point of view. But you have to be. It's been quite sort of flexible. So how have you been taking that sort of process through? What things have you been going? This bit works really well. Maybe not so much this much. And obviously you started off as a 1v1 and then you've moved to 2v2, and I mean that's sort of logical. But there's been some sort of more significant
sounds
changes
logical,
than that.
but you need to hear Brad tell you about that.
Go on, Brad.
It's exactly to your point. I mean, when Brad joined the team, he wasn't there from the very beginning.
Okay.
And he is an incredible lead designer and has really pushed us and pushed me for this game to be what it can be. And it wasn't like those things are a credit to, like, for instance, 2v2. Like, sounds like it's an obvious thing. It's a foregone conclusion, but that was a little bit of a battle. All right, I'll shut up, Brad. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's always just questioning everything, right? So like that's what I'm very good at, is questioning everything. So why is this like this? Why was this decision made? And anything anybody wasn't like, well, here's why, and it's like cemented. It's like, well, let's try to change it. And it doesn't always mean it's changing it for the right or the wrong or one way or another. We've run ourselves in circles actually a lot of times too. But really, on the design side, we want to iterate and iterate and iterate and iterate as fast as we can and try everything that there is to try, so then we know we're making the best decision. So for the game mode, I'll talk about the game mode and how that kind of led us into, going from 1v1 to 1v2. So like the game mode, we're like, hey, there's these elements that don't feel right. So we iterated on it. We tried all these different versions of the game mode and stuff like that. And then we came around to having these goalies, and we're like, okay, we really like the goalies, but something still feels off. And so then when we boiled down and found out what felt off, we're like, wow, we're kind of back to where we were in square one, a year and a half ago. But we have this one new element, which is the goalies, which changes entirely how the game plays. So like the flow of the game is what it was a long time ago, but the goalie makes the mechanics of that flow just better, essentially, right? So, but it took us, a year and a half to go through all these testing iterations of what could the game mode be, to find out, hey, it was pretty much correct for the flow of the game that we wanted, but we were just missing this one element, and it took us all that to find that one element. And then a similar kind of path to go from 1v1 to 2v2. Every test we did with anybody, didn't matter who it was, is there going to be a 2v2? Is there going to be a 2v2?
We tracked the feedback over time, and we got tired of seeing that at the top of every single feedback form.
Yeah, and so then we look at it and we're like, yeah, like the social aspect of gaming, like in a 1v1, it's not there. And maybe that's okay, in some instances, like on mobile games where you just pick it up and you put it down, and on your phone is different than being on.
It can work, I think, in TCGs, fighting games, But.
Yeah, and I wonder, and that could be. I mean, let's think about it, right? Like fighting games, a lot of those have been in console, right? So little bit different in console and how your friends act on console, or are they over in a couch next to you playing? So there's still different social elements that get adapted in those environments, right? And so the 1v1, we're like, man, we kind of need a little bit more of that social element. Everybody's asking for 2v2. Maybe this just works. And we literally spun it up, replayed it, and everyone's like, yep, there's no going back now, because this is just better. And so then we just had to basically say, all right, what's it going to take to go from the 1v1 to 2v2 and make this, the best that it can be?
I think people, they, if you're on the outside of game development, you might think, and I think this way sometimes about film, but my wife, our co-founder Katie, is a filmmaker, so I've learned it's actually the same in film. You think everything is like well planned. Like, of course, they've got it all figured out, whatever. You get inside there and you're like, oh my gosh, they don't actually know what they're doing. They're figuring it out as they go. And in my experience, the best processes are one that are just like Brad was talking about. It's where the team is relentlessly saying, yeah, this is pretty good, but what do people like the least about it? And how can we maybe make that the thing they like the most about it? And now that's exactly what happened. We were hearing, yeah, I really, I love this game. I think you have something good, but the 1v1 is definitely holding it back. And it took this kind of champion effort within the team, Brad and several folks, like just being like, we're tired of hearing this. We're just going to go stand it up and get it to work. And then we're going to see if Paul suddenly makes it the number one priority. And I did, because it was clearly better. Like, it was just so much more fun to play that way. And it was clearly the missing ingredient. That it seems obvious in hindsight, but it was a battle internally, because it's effort. It was a lot of refocusing to have to rebalance things for 2v2 and shift our primary focus to be on that. It was obviously the right decision, but it's a discovery process. And I think the thing that we try to have set us apart is just that we never stop listening to that feedback and asking ourselves that same question. Like, okay, probably the game is good. People are telling us the game is good, but there's always something that could make it better. There's always something that if you ask someone, yeah, but what's confusing? What's annoying? What's less fun? What got you to feel like I've played enough for now? What is that thing? And can we make that from the worst thing into the best thing about the game? This team has been doing this all the way back on Age of Empires. It was the exact same thing on Age of Empires. And I always remember especially the last year of development on every Age game, because it was the same thing every time. Like a year before we actually shipped the game, we kind of felt like maybe we were done. But we'd all sit down and we'd be like, okay, but if I wasn't working on this game and you just had this game in my Steam library, of course that was back before Steam, but you get what I'm talking about. And I wasn't a developer on this game, I was just a random gamer. Would I pick playing this game tonight for fun versus some other game that is like currently, and you know, in that year before the game was out, usually the answer was some people, maybe 10% of the team, were like, yeah. And the rest of them are like, no, honestly, no, I'm going to go back and play Counter-Strike. I'm going to go back and play some other game. And we're like, all right, we're not done yet. Like, it's just until our own team can't put the game down that they're working on, we're not quite there yet. And we're in that last year right now for Wildcard, so it's the most crucial time. And we're getting it to that point. We're definitely getting to the point where people are choosing to play Wildcard in their spare time, even though they worked on it all day long. And that's the indicator that we're getting there.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess that's the freedom you have as a well-funded, well-run
Yes.
company where you haven't got the commercial overhead to go. We've booked this into our slate, and you're in this quarter, and you got to hit it and all that.
That's true. That's true. As an
games
independent
industry
developer, we have both the freedom and the terror of being self-funded and having to manage our own runway and our own milestones and our own calendar, etc. And yeah, I mean, it is nerve-wracking because we do have a runway, we do have a budget. We've been working on this. It's been 2 years plus since we raised that money from Paradigm, and so it's a constant pressure for us to balance, like, this game has to be phenomenal. We have such a high bar for games we've worked on before that have gone on to be, evergreen games, like games that people are playing decades later, right? Like with Age of Empires. And so that's a really high bar, but we try to hold ourselves to that standard.
And I'm going to move on from Wildcard in a minute, but I mean, Brad, just sort of finishing off this bit. I mean, what do you think is so sort of appealing about this game, where clearly you are appealing to people, I guess, mainly on the sort of the action MOBA side of things? Obviously, there's the hybridization stuff in there as well, but what, aside from all the other stuff, the thousands and the Web3, what do you think is the thing that when this is launched, people are going to be not playing Counter-Strike and go right, we're doing
That's
this. What is that?
I want to give you my answer, and I really want to hear Brad's answer to this too. But I think where that comes from, and I think why we're starting to find an audience. Like, we just got back from Level Up, which was the biggest kind of gamer show I've ever been to. I don't know why I've never been to a Level Up before, but it was insane. 100,000 people in Vegas. We had a booth. It was amazing, and we got to meet with thousands of people who came and were playing Wildcard for the first time. And it was a very similar experience, so this is why, this is still my answer. When we started working on Wildcard, it was literally because there was no game out there that was giving us this feeling that we thought should exist in a game. We're like, look, I want a game that makes me feel like this amazing creature summoning champion that where it's like fully the fantasy of, I have a collection of creatures, of summons, and I show up in battle and I summon them and I'm fighting alongside them, and it's this amazing visceral action game but still takes advantage of that kind of deck building. Like, I'm a collector, I'm building my collection of summons over time, whatever. We just couldn't find a game that was like that when we started working on Wildcard, and it's still not a game like that out there. So this originally came from just us being like, there is a game that we think should exist, a game type that doesn't exist yet. There are things that are somewhat close to it. MOBAs have a little bit of the feeling. Games like Smite have a little bit of the feeling, but nothing that is exactly like this. And I think that is what is allowing Wildcard to find that audience. In the same way that for us, it's kind of found its way into our hearts and what we become, most excited about with this game. It's just something new. When I fire up Wildcard, it's not like anything else in my Steam library. It gives me a different experience, a particularly unique combination of deck builder, action game, and kind of strategy MOBA that, and I think there's probably a reason why there's no game like that, is because it's kind of wild to try to mash those three genres together. It's why it's taken us almost 7 years to get this formula right. And there were a couple of years there where we were just honestly lost in the woods. Like, we'd have a game where it was like, yeah, the deck building is really fun, but like when I bring it into the match, like the action part sucks. And then we'd go in the other direction and be like, well, now it just feels like a great action game, but I don't even care about my cards anymore because I'm just focused on my champion. And finding that balance has been really, really difficult. So I think that's the reason why there aren't other games like this right now. I'm hoping, though, obviously with Brad, giving it the genre a new name, CCAG, I'm hoping that this does inspire other developers to see if they want to build games in this formula, because it is a lot of fun. But that's my answer.
Yeah, I think coming off of the Level Up event, my answer might have been a little different before and after that event, honestly. So I think coming off of that event, we saw a lot of people that we didn't think would actually grasp the game. And so I think it kind of leans into hey, it's easy to learn, and as Paul says, has a lifetime to master. And it's literally just that. I think that's what people will gravitate towards is, hey, they jump in, they're like, wow, this feels good. It reminds me of X game, whatever game that is, right? It might be a TCG player, it might be a fighter, it might be a shooter, whatever it is. There's some element in there that they're going to grasp too. And then that's what's going to be the part that's easy for them to learn. But then all the other elements they're going to have to learn over time. And then once they start to learn those more and more, then they're going to start to dig in all the combos and all the numbers and all these other things. So there's going to be such a high ceiling for people that they're going to want to always get better and always learn what that next thing they can do is. So I think that's really what's going to like grasp people and what they're going to gravitate towards. They're going to be like, hey, I picked it up. Oh, I get this part of it because I've played that game, right? I've played that, and that might be a fifth of our game, right? And but it resonates with them, and then they want to figure out they want to find out more. They want to figure out the next thing. It's the whole like, want to know more? Press this button.
I love that answer so much. I was actually talking to a content creator also at Level Up, and he asked me a different question, but it actually I had the same answer. He was like, "What is your favorite part of working on Wildcard?" And I said, "It's actually watching the light go on in people's eyes." After they sit down, and it's just like Brad said, like they're like, I don't know what this game is. It seems weird and different, but like, let me just push some buttons and see what happens. And they do that, and they're like, oh, well, that's cool. I just like summoned this giant gorilla thing. It's fighting next to me, and all right, I can do this, And so they're like, that's not the moment though. Like they're having fun, but it's that moment when they realize, like, wait a minute, if I do this and then that. Like, oh, now I'm starting to learn how this works. Like I'm starting to develop a strategy in my head and figure out what the skill of this game is. And when that light bulb goes off, like you could just literally watch them like lean in. It's like this moment of engagement where they're like, wait, I thought this was probably a very simple game. But it turns out there's a really high skill ceiling. There's a lot to learn here. Even though it looks simple, there's tremendous depth to it. And that actually reminds me a lot of Age of Empires. I mean, I remember those first players at the very first E3 we went to, and they were like so enraptured by just the little guy throwing a spear and carrying the giant stake back to his village. And they're like, this must be the game. I love it. It feels like Civilization or something. And then realizing like, wait, there's actually so much more to this. There's an entire strategy that I can get good at. Like, it's that same thing. And I think as gamers, we love that process of discovery. And if I'm playing another extraction shooter, sometimes there can be that, but it's not as much. And I think that's one of the things that Wildcard uniquely offers is like, here's a new thing that you never played before, so you can't possibly have gotten good at it before, so here's your opportunity to get good at a new thing again. And we kind of love that as gamers. I do.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Cool. So we've spoken at length about Wildcard, and obviously we're going to throw that away now because that's just web2 stuff, and we're a blockchain gaming podcast.
I really appreciate that.
That's all relevant to us. No, it's very impressive. You managed to resist the temptation. I'm sure it wasn't hard to have a trading card game or a game with trading card elements where you didn't make all the cards NFTs, because that's pretty much de rigueur for everyone in the industry. So well done there. But yeah, let's get on to. So you've mentioned it a bit that as much as sort of you think the game is unique and is really going to sort of appeal to people, the sort of second, it's a sort of two-part sort of thing going on. You got the game and you got the ecosystem, and while the game might be a great game on its own, the bit where it's going to work and create an ecosystem is streaming. So you sort of mentioned in the past, we like tried to work with Amazon, obviously on Twitch, and we tried to work with Discord. And now you've talking a lot more sort of from last year about thousands your sort of streaming platform, effectively rebuilding sort of Twitch on using Web3 technology. So
I hate saying it like that because that sounds absolutely terrifying. But yeah,
well, yeah, you've done it. So if building an entire new sort of genre wasn't enough over the last 10 years, you decided to build a Web3 Twitch. So at what point did that sort of, because I'm sure when you were pitching to Paradigm, that probably wasn't part of the pitch.
Nope.
That you were going to. So that's a bit of a stretch goal.
Yeah, you could say that.
Yeah. So and I guess equally that to a degree feeds back into the game design because people are playing the game, and that's great for people playing the game. But as you say, you want this to be a successful ecosystem, and for that you probably want people to be spectators who are never going to play the game for whatever reason. So the two things have to be in balance.
So when we started working on this game, there were two things that we were really, really passionate about. One was building a game that allowed us to go back to our RTS developer roots and take advantage of the experience that we've had working on RTS games, working on games like Smite, and create some beloved brand new game that if we're successful at it, maybe moves the genre forward in the same way that MOBAs did, in the same way that auto battlers have. It's like maybe this is CCAGs, maybe it's the next thing. But also, I personally was looking for that next place in the game industry where I thought true growth would happen. And I just mean like, having worked in free-to-play, mobile, VR, I am continuously drawn to those places where something new is happening in gaming. And at that time, the thing that I was most fascinated with was this new phenomenon of people watching other people play games. I mean, like, we obviously all did that on our couches and at our friends' houses or whatever, but not at scale. Not until platforms like Twitch and Discord came along. So I just looked at that and I thought, I know we love working on new design frontiers that really challenge us, where we're not just trying to make a great game, but we're trying to do something fundamentally different about how we play and engage with games. And I think this is the next frontier we should go after. And not just because I think, there's really two reasons for it. One, watching a game is the most casual, accessible way to enjoy a game, period. This is kind of similar to why we were drawn to making iPhone games in the first place, because I was like, this will be something that everyone can get into. You don't have to install a game on a PC or even on a console. You could just play it if you're a normal person, you own a phone, you play games. So this is going to be a super accessible part of gaming. I feel the same way about streaming. This is the most casual way to enjoy a game. You don't even have to pick up a controller or install the game. You literally just go to a website and there you are watching someone else play the game. And my own experience with that is a lot of times watching my favorite streamers play my favorite games, it's a close second best to playing the game itself. It triggers the same neurons, right? You're I feel like even though I can't take the time to play the game right now, if I just have League of Legends up in a window, I kind of feel like I'm playing even though I'm working. It gives me a little bit of that. So just really drawn to that. And then also drawn to the design question of look, a lot of these games that are popular on streaming were built before streaming was even really happening. Games like League, Counter-Strike, Fortnite, really, it was kind of on the edge. But these games the designers of these games didn't get a chance to ask the question, if we knew this game was going to be popular and had a chance to be popular, it was going to go on to be streamed to hundreds of thousands of people, not just played, but watched, what would we change about the game design? Is there anything we would do differently? And I challenged the team to try to answer that question. I was like, that's to me a fascinating question. So that was where we started. And our answer at that point to your question, John, was well, we'll just go to Amazon and we'll ask Twitch to build these features for us, or we'll go to Discord and we'll get them to build these things for us. And that didn't work out. That was the first several years, was trying to get that to happen. And we were going and visiting Amazon, the Twitch team, on a regular basis and giving them this list of things that we needed them to do, or we wanted them to do to support our vision. And they were really, to their credit, very enthusiastic about it. But Amazon's a big company and they have a bunch of other masters that they serve, the Twitch team. And they're not like they can just do exactly what we want when we want it. And we started running up against that and being we really need to experiment with some of these things for Wildcard that we can't get Twitch or Discord to go build for us. So let's start doing some of those experiments ourselves. And a lot of these things just started life as Twitch extensions, Discord plugins, bots. We tried a bunch of different things. And then again started running into the limits of what we could do by trying to just get it to work on some other platform. So someone on the team, I think it was a couple of us, were like, what if we just go like try to stand up our own sort of streaming backend and just like, it didn't start off as like, let's go build Twitch. It was just started off as like, we really have these features we want to try that are enabling a viewer experience that we can't build on Twitch. So let's just go build some of that ourselves. And that was a couple years ago, and it just kind of snowballed from there. And what happened last year is we started showing that thing that we had been building, didn't even have a name yet, to some other studios, some other friends and colleagues that are building other games. And we were overwhelmed by the response. People were like, I would use that for my game. Like, I wish that Twitch had these features. Like, if you guys would ship this, I would want to bring my own game to this or my own community to this. And that's really what convinced us eventually at the end of last year to give it a name and to just kind of go out there and be like, all right, we're building this thing. We built it for Wildcard. And so we're going to keep focused on that. But if other folks, other developers and communities are interested in this, reach out to us. And actually, we're doing a stream this week with Pirate Nations as an example of this. And we're starting to run those experiments. At the end of the day, Thousands is, for us, satisfying a need that we have for Wildcard to create a next-generation spectator, content creator, and viewer experience. And I can give you some examples of like what we're doing that I just can't do on Twitch, I can't do on Discord, that Thousands enables. But for us, it's kind of like, if you hear those stories of like when Valve first built Steam, they weren't trying to build this giant thing that was used by the whole game industry. They just had this very real problem for their games where they're like could not sell them digitally, and Microsoft refused to give them the digital store they needed. So they're like, all right, screw this, we'll build it ourselves. And then that ended up being useful to the whole industry. I don't know if Thousands will be that way, but it's definitely from the same place. Like, we just have this desire, this need for the Wildcard vision to create a next generation spectator driven, streaming driven experience. And we had to build our own thing to make that happen. And that's what Thousands is.
And I guess the nice thing is that allows you seamlessly to put in the Web3 stuff. So if you hadn't have done that, you would have well, so sending us down the river. But
so there's a great example here because, I was mentioning earlier, like, there's several things that Thousands lets us do that we can't do on Twitch. But I'll just give you the simplest example of this. We want it to be true that if someone streams Wildcard and their viewers go on to play and install the game themselves, and let's say they buy a skin or they buy a card pack in the game, all we want is the ability to attribute some of that revenue back to the streamer who helped bring those players to our game. We know from experience working on other games that have been streamed that the users that we get that come from like a streamer are the most authentically engaged users that we get. Like, it's so much more effective if we can get someone playing the game who was introduced to it by their favorite streamer compared to like us just going and putting an ad on Facebook, right? So at the end of the day, this is like a user acquisition thing. We have a certain user acquisition budget and dollars that we want to put out there to get more people to know about Wildcard. We have a choice of where we put those UA dollars. We can put them on Google ads, on YouTube, on Facebook, or whatever. What we know is that when we're able to work with a streamer who is authentically excited, engaged in our game, and then they play the game and they tell their viewers about it, those viewers end up being the highest quality players we could get. They engage, they retain, they monetize really well, like, etc. So all we wanted was the simple ability to share that revenue back with the content creators that helped bring those viewers. And we cannot do that on Twitch. We cannot do that on Discord. They just do not have the features to enable that. And this is what a blockchain was made for. Blockchains are ideal at tracking attribution and sharing revenue and monetization across a broad ecosystem. So, we were talking earlier about like, what is the ecosystem of Thousands and Wildcard? It is all about just doing this, just allowing for the attribution of content creation and viewership to lead to the monetization and the sharing of that value back with the content creators that help, tell the world about our games. Like, if that's all that Thousands did, that alone would make it worthwhile to exist, in my opinion. Because when we make streamers and content creators more successful for streaming our game, maybe there'll be more of them that stream our game. Like, it's a win-win. And I don't understand why this opportunity is being missed by the rest of the industry. Maybe it's because, like, doing it is hard unless you're willing.
That's exactly the reason.
Yeah, yeah.
No one else is so mad to build their own version of Twitch.
Yeah,
using
well,
blockchain.
okay, yeah, that's fair. But also, like, Web3 is uniquely suited to this, and I think a lot of companies are still just allergic to Web3 because it's gotten a bad rap for other reasons. From my perspective, it's just a technology. It's a technology that allows us to very easily, one of the things it does really well is distribute value amongst a community and ecosystem, which is the number one thing we need if we're trying to build the vision I just mentioned. So for us, it was the perfect fit. And when we figured that out, to your earlier question, we were like, honestly, at the time, like Brad and I and everyone on the team were struggling with like, okay, what is the Web3 of Wildcard going to be? I told you, Paradigm didn't care. They're like, just make a great game. But I was stressing about it. So like, we've told the world that Wildcard is somehow a Web3 game. But what do we even mean? Like, what is it? We're not, and you know, we knew, and people like Brad and the lead game designer, or lead director of the game, Dan, other people were like, we cannot sacrifice the fun of the game for the economics of Web3. We're just not going to do that, because if we go down that path, the greatest possibility is that Wildcard becomes just a vehicle for financial extraction, which we've seen a lot of other games become. They just become a financial instrument that people are using to move money around, or to you know, cash out or extract value, put value in, extract value. Like that's, and we're like, there are games that can do that. One of my friends is the guy Hilmar who runs CCP with the EVE Online game, and there's a company that has made it work. But if you talk to Hilmar, maybe you have, he'll tell you like he wouldn't wish it on his worst enemies. Like it's like the hardest thing to build a game with a real money economy. And like in most cases, especially for a game like Wildcard that isn't designed to be that, it's designed to be played for fun, trying to bring in those elements can actually wreck the game design. So we knew we weren't going to go down that road. And it was like, okay, well, is there going to be any Web3 element at all? And once we realized that this was the thing we were trying to solve for anyway, it was the perfect fit for these tools and technologies, suddenly it was like just this giant relief, and it gives us a clear direction.
I should just point out for relevance, you did release a sort of a pass, which I suppose was sort of a Kickstarter type thing. So yes. they actually did okay as assets. I remember thinking they're $44 they started out at. I don't know what they're out like these days.
I think they peaked at a couple thousand, and then we did an airdrop, and of course that made them go down a little bit. But
and then you also had quite a lot of collectibles from one of the early stages of Wildcard, so I collected a few batches of those. So there was a sort of I think you were sort of clear that it wasn't. These were peripheral sort of if you're a collector, and then in fact you have a token, the WC token, which you have airdropped to people who have been involved in some of the testing and people who held the NFTs. Interestingly, that's locked to wallet. So talking about the extraction, you can't. I have some sitting in a wallet. I can't do anything with it. That's fine. I'm not an extractive person. But you sort of, it's interesting how you, as you say, you're sort of keeping it outside of the important bits. But there is, for people who are sort of really keen on the game, there are those things there, and they do sort of have meaning. And obviously, in thousands, the token is the thing. And I guess you want to drive that sort of crypto virality around that you can do around a sort of token that is. It's not a meme coin, but it's sort of around the sort of the community, and sort of you're using it in sort of meta ways. We probably won't go into all that now because that's another whole big thing.
Well, I love how you say it, because you keep using the phrase around, like wrapped around. And I remember when I was first connecting with Brad on this part of the vision, and I was like, in Web3, people talk about playing to earn. First of all, as if it's this brand new thing, and second of all, as if it's like a bad thing or that it has this negative connotation. And I think Brad was like, wait, you mean like every other game has play to earn, like before Web3? Like you have users showing up who play games professionally and stream games, and they get paid all day long for doing that with Web2 games. So like this is already true that for successful games, there are multiple layers of economics wrapped around them, real money economics that are incredibly successful. I mean, the vibrant ecosystem for your favorite competitive games that have become esports or just become popular competitive games, they spawn hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue and value that is transacted around those games every year. So this is not a new concept. In fact, it's an area that is underserved and needs tools and technologies that make that world more accessible to more people. This is kind of what I was talking about earlier. Like, we would love it to be true that a casual competitor can get involved in playing Wildcard competitively and can maybe, play locally or in smaller tournaments and still kind of engage in a real money economy around the game, even though none of that stuff is inside of the core game of Wildcard itself. And I don't understand, in Web3, we sort of look at these things as if they're in conflict. They're not in conflict at all. What we have to do is just recognize that things aren't one-dimensional. Like a lot of the early Web3 games kind of lump all the users into one bucket. They're like, you are a player, you are an earner, you are a content creator, you're all the things. We only just have this one type of user. And like my own experience is the successful game ecosystems have multiple cohorts of users that do it for different reasons. And they all play the same game, but they're playing it differently. A content creator is playing it to entertain their audience. A pro gamer is playing it to max their skill and to get it to the top of a leaderboard and win a tournament or a championship. And a normal player like one of my kids, they're playing it for fun, and I think it is as the Web3 gaming industry evolves and matures and begins to recognize that, the same thing happened in free to play. You have different user cohorts. You have to treat them differently. You have to give them different experiences in the same game. I think it's gonna suddenly all these debates and all this tension around, well, is it play to earn or play to airdrop or what? It's all gonna go away because it's just about great games. And then the layers of fun that you can wrap and economy and ecosystem that you can wrap around that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you've just mentioned the term there. I don't think we used it before, but esports. I mean, Brad, as the designer, I mean, it maybe me as an external person talk about esports is a bit meaningless. I mean, people generally say you don't design a game for esports, but if your game's good enough, it will become an esport. I mean, is that true? I mean, but clearly you've looked at some things with Wildcard to say, it's been designed as a streaming game, so that's maybe not an esport, but that's, some element of that in there. Presumably.
Yeah, there's definitely a difference between, even competitive, right? Is it a competitive game? Is it an esports game? Is it a game to be, streamed? There's a lot of steps that go into it. When you look at the esports side, it's really like, what does it take to have consistent tournaments and leagues and, overall a championship, like things like that. Like when it really has structure of some sort. And then there's different steps inside of esports. There's grassroots esports, right? There's, seasons, there's leagues, there's one-off tournaments, there's a million ways to do it. Definitely don't want to ever force a game to be esports. If you try to force a game to be esports, it generally falls flat on its face. I think we've seen that time and time again with a bunch of other games. So it's really make a game competitive, and that doesn't mean casual people can't play it at all, but it means that inside the game you always kind of feel that essence of like, I want to win this. I'm playing to win. I'm not just playing to, walk around and go fishing, or something like that, right? But even in that, you still want to win. You still want to win, right? You want to catch the fish. So I think a lot of things, almost no matter what you do, it's probably competitive in its own right in some way. Like, am I going from point A to point B? Well, there's probably a purpose I'm doing that, and therefore probably some sort of competition, right? So having the competitive feel of the game, it's definitely has that built into it. It's got the vibe, but and we're doing these broadcasts on Thousands with the exhibition series, showcasing communities, having more hardcore, tournaments and players in there, but that doesn't mean it's an esport yet. Like the community has to say, we want this to be an esport, and the community has to take that first step. Like they have to go put on the tournaments, they have to figure out what it is, and then if there's a point in time where the development team and the developers, want to pick it up and help out and either support that or then take over and do it themselves, then that can happen. But when a developer jumps in from day one, it generally does not go well.
What I love is that Brad and the team's approach to this is really just about, we never talk about it internally as like, oh, we have to do these things to make Wildcard an esport or to make it possible for it to be an esport. Like I've never even heard a phrase like that happen internally. Instead, what it is Brad just is himself one of the best, probably the best player of Wildcard right now, as you would hope the lead designer is.
Yes.
And then he brings together this group of people that is called the Brad's Bunch, who are also like hardcore gamers, and those people will tell you immediately if the game is not allowing them to express their skill. Like they just get frustrated. They're like, well, I want to get better, but like these features, or there's just not really an opportunity for me to get better at playing with my champion, for instance. Or like we had a feature in there that would lock up the champion when they were meleeing. And it was like too frustrating for our high skill players because they were just like, there's not much I can do here. Like I just hit my button and I wait for this combo to finish and it's not fun. This kind of thing happens constantly where these high skill players that we have brought into our community tell us what's frustrating and where they want us to raise that skill ceiling. And all we do is listen to them and follow that. And, you know, as long as, like Brad was saying, as long as we're keeping the game still accessible to casual players at the same time, there's almost no limit to how high we can try to raise that skill ceiling for those players who, you know, in their mind, they're thinking, if this game ends up being popular, this might be my career. This might be the game that, you know, and so we're just there to serve that audience and to see where they take it.
Mm-hmm. I should point out as well, we're saying it's not going to be an e-sport until it is an e-sport.
That's right. It's like a catch-22 that way.
One thing that is quite striking about what is a sort of a sort of on the action side a MOBA type game is it is clearly very sports oriented. So it is very much like when you're playing the game, it is in sort of like, I mean, a complicated pitch, but it is sort of like a pitch, and
it is,
as you
yeah.
say, you have goalies now, and you know there is a very clear sports element, and you have some other things which we won't go into now, sort of around factions and blah blah. You know, the structure around it is very much built like how a sports industry would be built. So it's sort of interesting that you have that sports thing. Anyway, it's sort of come to the end now. So I just kind of wanted to say, sort of where are you now in terms of sort of what's happening, roadmap? You're doing play tests, I think, pretty regularly every Friday now, or you certainly have been doing them on Friday. So what should people be looking out for?
Let me hand that one first to Brad. I can talk about the 1,000 side and what we're doing there, but
okay.
But yeah, in terms of the game design and where we're pushing now, Brad, you take that one.
Yeah, so Fridays and Saturdays we're open for alpha playtests, so you can go onto Steam and you can sign up to request access. We're pretty much letting people in every weekend right now, and you know, up to a certain amount of people because we don't want to just explode everything in a day.
Brad only has a certain amount of bandwidth.
And then you could also wishlist us on Steam. So early access will happen sometime over the summer. So that's kind of where we're at on the development side. Is early. Alpha right now, I think we're in like our kind of third build of alpha, wherever that is on our time frame. I don't know, but that's kind of where we're at. So we've been doing this for like a month and a half or a couple months now, and yeah, Fridays, Saturdays, come play with us. Join the Discord if you want.
What I love is
as well.
So some of the players who have taken Brad up on that offer and have showed up. And this is, again, to keep invoking Age of Empires, but it's very similar. Like, we had people that emerged early in that community who were like, this is my game, you know, and they would just show up all the time for playtests and all the time for the community. And one of those guys ended up being the lead designer on Age of, like, we were like, this guy is so amazing, and his name's Kevin Holm. He's like a famous guy in the industry now. But he started off as just another guy who was really good at playing Age of Empires and wanted to get involved. So we've had those folks already emerge, and at Level Up, we had two of them, Dragoon and Mr. House, and they were there at the show, and they took the stage and played against Team Liquid and beat them. So these are so these are those opportunities that are starting to show up for the game and in our community, and for those folks who are taking us up on that offer and getting involved early, you know, they might be famous players of Wildcard in the future, and I love that. Love that that's happening.
Cool. And in terms of thousands, what's happening there?
Okay, so I'll just share a little bit of alpha. I was gonna, I still am gonna put together a post on Twitter for this week because we've been running now. We're coming up on EX12, so our 12th kind of streamed event on the Thousands platform for Wildcard, and I wanted to share some of the data that we're already seeing. So first, Thousands is sort of becoming its own thing, and where it's really defining its own personality compared to something like Twitch or Discord is really it's a platform made for the people who are like the highest affinity, the most loyal, the most engaged parts of a community. So whereas something like Twitch, it might be all about getting to 100,000 viewers. On Thousands, it's really about your most dedicated 1,000 fans showing up there, and you know, with retention and engagement and monetization that are far greater than you would see on a platform like Twitch or Discord. And we're already starting to see that. So our ARPU, which is average revenue per user on Thousands, is over $100 now. And these are viewers. Yeah, these are viewers who are showing up and engaging with features. Like we have this feature called rallies that lets the viewers kind of lean in and in a way like predict and cheer for and rally for the team they think is going to win, and then they can earn points based on that. And then there are these referees who show up and watch how players are rallying and then can do airdrops and things like that. And it's the numbers that I'm seeing now, they actually remind me of early Words of Friends numbers. Retention is like over 70%. Like the amount of people that are showing up from event to event and keep showing up. Our payer conversion is 83% at the last event. And that event made $35,000 for one stream. So this is what you get when you add up like good retention, high ARPU, and a dedicated audience. And that's incredible. Like our game isn't even out yet, and we have streams that are monetizing regularly above $20,000. And like when we do want to level up, it's a $30,000 stream. This is an incredible thing. We're still at the very beginning of this, but if this can help bring that vision to life, where Wildcard and Thousands is the place where, as a content creator and a community, you can come together and generate way more value than you can on other platforms, and then we can share that value back to the content creators and the communities that are helping bring that would really be a dream come true. I think that is, besides just having, and it's the most important thing, like none of this works if this isn't true, which is Wildcard has to be a truly great game that people love. On top of that, if we're able to build this, like we were saying earlier, this thing that wraps around it, that creates huge value for content creators and spectators and viewers, that's going to be like a force multiplier for what we're doing here, and it's amazing to see that starting to happen. So anyway, just wanted to share some of that early data with you. It's really compelling to see that after just 12 events, and the game isn't even out yet. So we'll see where we go from here, but it's very exciting for us as a team.
In these situations, I always slightly cynically say golden cohort, but even for a golden cohort, that's for a bunch of spectators on a stream, that's that.
Well, and I love it too, because we have those golden cohorts. Like Brad was mentioning, he has Brad's bunch. That's the cohort of users who shows up to every playtest, and they're so leaned in, and they're just trying to get as good as they can at the game. And then we have this cohort of this golden cohort of fans, basically, spectator viewers, right? I call them the Mark Cubans of our universe, right? These are the people that they're not necessarily down on the field playing themselves, but they're sitting courtside watching their players do their thing, and they're like sharing in the value of that. Like that's an incredibly exciting ecosystem that I'm hoping that we can build around Wildcard. That I don't like. You can see it existing for other games and other like games that have become esports, but it's it's a walled garden. Like if you want to get inside of that. The true like high level pro gaming and content creation space for a big game, it's kind of hard to get up to that top level, and we're hoping that Thousands and Wildcard is the place where anyone can endeavor for that and achieve that.
Yeah. And great to see that's the Web3 bit as well. So that seems to be people are actually paying for the Web3 bit rather than extracting.
I don't think it's the only place, but I'm so glad that we have found a place where Web3 truly actually belongs without having to be inside the game where it's messing with the fun.
Well, as you say, it's adding. It's the flow, isn't it? You don't feel it's been like bolted on to. Obviously, you don't need it for fundraising, but you feel like it's actually there and fulfilling a purpose for all various people in the ecosystem. So, very impressive. Thank you very much, Paul. I think this is the longest podcast we've done, so that's excellent. Obviously, it's been very interesting. Thanks to Paul and Brad for their time. Thanks, guys.
Thanks a lot for having us, John. It was a blast.
We'll have to have you back on when we have things going properly live, I suppose.
Awesome.
Thanks to you for watching, listening, however you are consuming the podcast. Every episode we are talking to people who are sort of grappling with some of the interesting challenges of Web3 and still finding the opportunities and hopefully building out this great new way of playing games and watching games and spending in games. So don't miss out, do subscribe, and we'll see you next time.